Abhishek Singh, Additional Secretary in India's Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Welcome, sir, to the program. Should we be surprised at today's tech outage? Was it a disaster, if one can call it a disaster, waiting to happen?
See, like more than calling it a disaster, I think that there's a lot of lessons over here. Like the more and more we use technology, the more and more we rely on it. While on one hand, it results in a lot of convenience. It helps in so many systems becoming more efficient, and we all become very dependent on that. But we should also be aware of the risks that are there, and we should always, whenever we use technology in such a large way, especially for interconnected systems, infrastructure systems, airports, banks, financial systems, then we should have a resilience policy. We should have some means to fall back on what happens if something goes wrong. So if that plan is there, then we will be okay. And the second thing that we need to do is to always be aware of what are the advisories being used, what are the systems that are we dependent on, and how they can be made more safe and more secure. And the third thing that I would like to mention is that whichever companies are installing these, whether it's CrowdStrike or whether it's Microsoft, normally the standard operating procedures require them to do a fair level of testing and before they actually deploy something in the production environment. So when we need to get into the greater details with regard to how this happened, whether there's some flaw in testing or something went wrong, something was done in a rush, why did this update result in what happened? So if proper testing and studies were done before deployment, this should not have happened. So for future, there are a lot of lessons to be learned over here.
Okay, apart from the inconvenience and delays caused by the global outage, how serious could be its financial and economic cost to companies? Also, sir, your concerns about work in some hospitals being affected, as we saw in Germany, also in Britain.
See, whenever any services are disrupted, for example, if airlines are not able to operate or banks are not able to operate or any transportation services are disrupted or media channels are disrupted, then there's definitely a financial cost to it. So one needs to always be aware that if something is going wrong, if one set of systems is going wrong, do we have any other system to fall back on? In most data centers and all, they are always set up data recovery centers so that if something goes wrong, operations shift to that center. But in this case, since it was mainly with regard to the Falcon endpoint security that the CrowdStrike had installed on so many systems, what happened was that the compute capacity of all the systems went beyond 100%, and this led to the blue screen of death showing up, and this led to users not being able to access services. In such cases also, like for example, airlines started issuing manual systems. So can we have an alternate system on which thing can run? So that needs to be thought through for all those who are relying on such digital systems for their critical services. And for hospitals, it becomes all the more important because the emergency services or ICU services should have something which can run even if some disruption happens.
And interestingly, in India, the two principal stock exchanges, the Bombay Stock Exchange and the National Stock Exchange, were not affected. And India's banking sector was also largely unaffected by this outage. Why is that?
See, like primarily it is, as I mentioned, this thing happened only for systems that were using the CrowdStrike security system, which is the Falcon endpoint security system that was installed. And this Falcon endpoint security system also caused mishaps to happen or crash to happen in Windows-based systems. So like, for example, the government IT system, the NIC system is not dependent on CrowdStrike's Falcon endpoint security system, so nothing happened. Similarly, I believe what I think would have happened is that the Bombay Stock Exchange, the National Stock Exchange must also be using some other endpoint security system which ensured that these systems were safe and secure. Most of the banks in India were also not disrupted, but yes, some airlines did face problems. So it was only limited to those systems which were using the CrowdStrike's Falcon endpoint security, and when this update was pushed, all Windows-based systems got disrupted.
Very quickly, sir, lessons in this global IT outage for India and the world.
So the key lessons are that we have to always be aware of the risks that are there. We always have to have a policy of what is our plan B? If something falls down, something doesn't work, where do we go? What is the alternative that we have? Third is that we have to always be aware of the advisories that the certain issues, certain is the India's cybersecurity agency, the incident response system that team does. That team is always alert. That team is monitoring the India's internet traffic. The team is monitoring what all cyber incidents are happening globally and how it can impact users in India. And this is not only for the government. This is for both private and government enterprises, businesses. So we must follow the certain advisories strictly and implement them in letter and spirit, whether it's with regard to installing patches, with regard to updating our software systems, with regard to ensuring antivirus and licensed software are used. So this becomes very, very important for all of us. Third, we also need to have a system of doing regular cyber security audits and ensuring that if there are any bugs or if there are any vulnerabilities which are found are constantly plugged. And last but not the least, I would say that we must always have a plan B to fall back on and trust the India's cyber security system to ensure that all systems in India remain fully secure.
Yes, always have a plan B to bank upon. Thank you, Abhishek Singh ji, for your analysis and insight on the subject. India's